Hello, I'm Edna Kane Williams, Executive Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at AARP. The time you are investing today to take the course, Becoming a More Inclusive Volunteer, is critical to our overall success. At AARP, we are working to uplift the voices and experiences of all people. As an AARP volunteer, we need your help to embed diversity into our advocacy, education, and outreach work. This training and others like it are examples of our commitment to the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the 50 plus. As we all work to fulfill AARP's mission to empower people to choose how they live as they age, we must remember that AARP's founder, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, saw the power of uniting diverse and inclusive voices to advocate for change. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is everyone's responsibility at AARP. Thank you for taking the time to take this training. It will help you grow your skills at becoming a more inclusive volunteer.
I'm Derek Young, and today's topic is impact over intent. That's a very simple phrase, isn't it? Impact over intent. It's simple to say, but it's powerful in its understanding, especially for you as an AARP volunteer and as you look to become a more inclusive AARP volunteer. Let's face it, everything you say and do becomes who you are. That's how people know you, that's how people remember you. And when you think of all the important things you have to do as an AARP volunteer, what I want to share with you is while your intentions, your intent, while that's a major thing, what I want you to really begin to major on is the impact of what you say and what you do. Think about it this way. I have a very good friend, and he and his wife were about to celebrate an anniversary. He said to me, he said, "D.Y., I'm thinking about getting her some roses." I said, "Man, that sounds awesome. Does she like roses?" He said, "Doesn't everybody like roses?" I said, "I don't think so." I said, "You might want to find out maybe from her mother, from a friend or someone, does she like roses?" He said, "Come on, man, everybody likes roses." I said, "Well, you do you, but that would be my advice." Well, the anniversary came. I followed up with my friend. I said, "How did the roses go?" He said, "It was horrible." I said, "What happened?" He said, "I presented the roses and my wife began to cry." Cry? She said the roses remind her of a deceased aunt. Clear example. Were his intentions good? Sure they were. But the impact is clearly not what he wanted. Well, over the past 3 decades, as I've worked with all sorts of people, organizations on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of the things I've found is that sometimes a person's intentions are what people focus on. Therefore, you and I, as AARP volunteers, I think we can increase the level and quality of our service to our community, to our AARP members, by becoming more aware of the impact of those things we say and do. So today, I want to share 4 concepts that I believe will help you become an even greater volunteer. The way I want you to think about this concept of impact over intent is sort of from 2 angles. The first angle is when you're the person who has said or done something where the impact doesn't meet your intention. The second angle is when someone else has said or done something that doesn't hit the mark. Let's start there. You know, in the sessions that you're going to be participating in, one of the things we'll talk about is the concept microaggressions. One of the things we often say about microaggressions is that a microaggression can be something someone says or does that hurts you, that makes you feel bad, that makes you feel like you don't belong. And they can do it either intentionally or unintentionally. Well, when we think about intent, I'm really referencing those times when a person says or does something that you receive as a microaggression. One of the key ways to think about that is, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Meaning, I'm going to assume, I'm going to believe, I'm going to hope that you didn't mean to have the impact on me that you did. That was not your intention. You didn't know that that term, that phrase, you didn't know that that gesture had that meaning for me or for anyone. So the concept there is giving people the benefit of the doubt is one thing I want to try to encourage you to do when you are the one who is experiencing some type of microaggression. Well, think about it from the vantage point of the first angle I told you to consider. When you're the person who either says or does something that someone else finds offensive and you in no way meant that, you in no way wanted that, wouldn't you want the same thing? Wouldn't you want that person to know, hey, I am so sorry, I apologize, that's not what I meant, that's not what I intended? Sure you would. Now, I'm not going to say that's easy, and I'm not going to say that's automatic, but when you think about your role in your city, in your town, when you think about the number of people you will interact with on behalf of AARP, that's the first thing I really want you to think about, is that ability to both give people the benefit of the doubt and hopefully be in a position where if you need it, someone will give you the benefit of the doubt. This concept, impact over intent. The second point I want you to think about is, as an AARP volunteer who is committed to the mission, the goals of the organization nationally and locally where you live, one of the things I want to recommend is that you begin to study what you've learned from your own experience and the experiences of others about those things that they have said and done that don't have the same impact as was intended. Meaning, the more you can learn about what other people are learning, the more you can be in a position to what? Not repeat that behavior. You see, we could spend a whole hour talking about words and phrases that people across this country find inappropriate that sadly some people still use. Well, the point there is, I believe the more you learn from your fellow volunteers of those things they've said and done that didn't quite go the way they intended, that didn't turn out the way they intended. See, by educating yourself in that manner, you're going to have, I believe, more of a treasure chest full of experiences that help you be what? Impact-minded in your interactions. Let's say you're going into a new community that you've never been a part of in your city or town. Maybe it's a community that has different religious beliefs. Maybe it's a community that has different eating habits, whatever it might be. So the suggestion there is, as you think about people that you know who have familiarity with that community, that might be a great chance to what? Learn from them. Hey, what are some terms and phrases I should steer clear of? Or what are some terms and phrases I should maybe focus on? Again, that's impact focus. Because again, you're a volunteer. You're volunteering for one of the greatest organizations in the world. So we know that generally speaking, what you hope to have happen is positive, but because there are so many different ways to look at things, because there are so many different viewpoints about the same thing, the suggestion here is learn from people who've learned from their own experience. Preferably good experience, but maybe even bad experience, so that once again, your communication as often as possible is going to be impact focused and not just intent focused. I want to say this, and you'll hear me say this multiple times throughout this series. I want to personally thank you for devoting your time and your talent to the work of AARP. I also want to thank you for taking your time to get more insight on how to be an even better volunteer. Well, this next point is very important. We're talking about this idea that you and I, as volunteers, as people, there are going to be those times when we say or do something where our intentions were good, but the end result just doesn't hit the mark. The other person is not feeling it, they don't want to hear it that way, or it's maybe even hurtful. That happens, we all know that. Well, the other thought I want to offer you here is, how can you improve your ability to give honest feedback to someone who has had a negative impact, though their intentions were good. You see, there may come a time where you're in a meeting, where you're in a planning session, where you're at an AARP retreat or special event, and you see someone do something that is clearly wrong, inappropriate, out of bounds, or just straight whack. It's just bad. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle it? Well, all I want to offer you here is a level of sensitivity to, once again, like we already said, start with that giving the person the benefit of the doubt if you can, because let's face it, sometimes people are clearly, totally aware of exactly what they're saying and its exact goal to be harmful. So we're not talking about those instances specifically. But what I would say is, as an AARP volunteer, whatever the event, whatever the circumstance, begin to ask yourself a few questions. One, how would I want someone to bring this issue to me if I had made that same mistake? Two, what words, what phrases can I use going into this conversation to try to pull some of the tension out of this interaction? Three, what's the real goal here anyway? Generally, the goal is going to be to maybe seek an apology, to seek some clarification, and to try to say to that person, here's something I want to recommend you maybe think about in the future to avoid, because it may have the same impact on other people. So again, the concept there is your role as a volunteer also puts you in a position to give people very constructive feedback about things they're saying that are negatively impacting others. Now, a little caveat I want to share. The more diverse our society becomes, the more diverse your volunteer pool becomes, the more diverse your AARP membership becomes, the more challenging it is to make sure we have great impact that matches our intent. Because let's face it, as I said before, so many people with so many views on so many different things sometimes makes it challenging for one language, for one approach, for one style to work universally. So what I'm offering here is this idea that impact over intent. If that's how you think about yourself as a volunteer, you're going to be a person who will say, look, I want to give other people the benefit of the doubt as often as possible because I sure want it. I'm going to be studying and learning other people's perspective, other people's experience, so that I can try to be as impact focused as possible. And thirdly, I want to be a person, as an AARP volunteer, who is kind and considerate and caring in giving people constructive feedback in the event that I'm a part of a situation where, once again, the impact did not meet the intent. I believe that as you practice these things, as you improve in these areas, you'll not only be a better volunteer, but you'll help others be better volunteers as well.